Well, that only took like 3 hours.
Now the setup is done.
Whoa.
Hey guys, I'm Tim.
I'm Bob.
I'm Mike.
And this is the Board Game Rundown, and today we are going to review the very small and very fast to play Andromeda's Edge. Just kidding. This guy's massive. This is from Cardboard Alchemy. This is Luke and Max Laurie design. This is sort of the spiritual successor to Dwellings of Eldervale.
Indeed.
Yes.
And there's a lot going on here.
What?
Kind of similar to Dwellings. There's asymmetric player factions. There are sort of a modular board setup. There's going to be tons of tracks that you're moving up and scoring points with, and the combat is essentially the same. We have a video where we play the whole thing
Whole
through.
shebang.
Do we want to give like a very brief rules explanation? Okay.
Yeah, we gave it a rundown, right?
I guess we do.
Yeah.
Okay, so on your turn, you're going to do like one of two things. You're either going to deploy a ship, launch a ship, or you're going to recall your stuff. And then a whole bunch of things are going to happen based on what you do. Depending on the zone you activate when you launch, you're going to do the actions for that. You may be claiming moons, things like that. Or you may be building, spending resources to gain resources. There's a whole plethora of fun things you can do there.
You would say we have a plethora, Tim?
You would say that there's a plethora. If there are raiders close enough, or if they've got a special ability, they are then going to move in and attack. We would then resolve combat. If you win combat, you get to move up the track. There are cards you can play that might affect how combat goes or if it even happens. There's the fun thing about the tactics cards is sometimes you can play them even when you're not involved in the combat. So it can give you some other things to do, keep you engaged and paying attention to what's going on. If you win, you get to move up a track. If you lose, you might get a tactical card, or if you have slotted a moon there on your board, you could choose to activate that moon and maybe gain those resources or the card, your choice, right? Then play goes to the next person. After you've gotten a bunch of ships out on the board or they've been damaged and they're now in the scrapyard, you can recall. And so to recall, you're going to activate this engine you've been building on the side, hopefully. And you basically, on the green one, it's awesome. You place the ship and you're going to activate the whole row. And this is indicated because it is one continuous column across the top, which to me is what signifies that, hey,
it's all one thing.
It's all one thing. So that green one's a really good one to build up if you can, because it's going to allow you to get a whole bunch of stuff, because it's kind of hard to get stuff sometimes, especially early on. Then the other rows, basically you need to have at least one ship in that row, and then you can spend energy or ships to activate the other locations. If you have slotted a moon in a dotted circle between two of them that form a full circle, you can, or it's not a dotted circle, but you get what I'm saying. You make a full circle.
2 half moons.
You can put a moon there, and then if you've activated both
of those modules,
you're going to get what's on that moon right there, which is going to again perpetuate and feed that engine, and that's pretty much how it all works. And then the bottom one is almost more like.
A lot of end game stuff.
A lot of end game stuff. Like there's definitely, but not always. But it tends, from what I've seen, a lot of it was some end game stuff. And again, you build a module, you're going to move up that track. You can build these buildings, which is one of the actions you can do. You're going to score a bunch of points for the leaders you put in that building and the leaders that are adjacent. So that's another thing. When you put a ship down, you can pick up your leaders from that area. Why would you do that? Maybe to stop other people from scoring them, or to have them on your board so that when you do build a building, you can slot them in that building. There's a lot of minutia. There's a lot of things going on, but I will say that once you get going, the game makes a lot of sense. It takes a minute. There's
definitely a learning curve.
Yeah. And when we get into it, we'll ask Bob about the rule book and stuff. But I feel like I benefited a little bit by having played Dwellings before, and also I watched a pretty good rules video, like online. which at least I sort of had a few things already in my brain.
It wasn't as abstract from the get-go.
I had a few things in my brain already. There were definitely questions like early on, like, well, how do I get this? What do I,
how do I get more resources?
Yeah, please, for the love of God. Those first turns are so dry.
Yeah.
But okay. But that's a very basic and brief overview. There's also sort of an event tracker. So anytime you do anything that has an exclamation point, you're gonna advance that tracker. When it gets all the way to the end, we're gonna reveal a new planet, and we'll seed it with moons, and then we will resolve an event card. If you go up to the nebula, it's gonna allow you to look at the top 2 cards of that event deck. You're gonna put one on the bottom and one on the top. Hoping then you can get the one you want to happen, unless the player right after you also then goes to the nebula and then doesn't like what you picked. But I mean, there's a lot more to the game than just that, but that's sort of a very brief overview of how it goes. Okay, so just Bob, we'll start with you. Some of your thoughts on gameplay, components, rules, etc.
So I like to typically talk about the components. I really enjoy these components. I think that the table presence of the board over there is amazing. The buildings you build, the way you stick your leaders in there, and you put them on top of the ships you need to have in place in order to build it. This is the deluxe version, so instead of just having the cardboard chits for buildings, we do have like the fancier plastic models, but I think that it's worth it. I think it adds definitely some aesthetic value to it. And the trays are really nice for like your player components, and for the resource bits, those are super nice. Now the ones here, if you do pick these trays up, it does have a spot on the board where you can just put those down on the board. But the trays are nice because you'll pull the tray apart and all the cards will store in underneath. I will say that they don't all really fit in this very well when it's full. When this is full, like the top ones kind of want to slide around and fall out of there.
They do not fit in that very well.
Correct.
You got it.
Also, one of our biggest pet peeves is, so one of the stretch goals for this was you get sleeves. They gave little tiny square sleeves for those. There is no way those cards are fitting in there if they are sleeved.
Well, and also then that stack would be that tall.
Correct. It would
and
be
those cards are going everywhere. Right?
Everywhere. Yep. And so now you don't hold on to those, so you don't need those sleeves. It's fine. Just leave them unsleeved. They're just going to build in your tableau. You're not going to hold them in your hand. Now, they did come with the sleeves for the small cards. Those are nice because they're tactics. A lot of people hold the tactics cards in their hands, and so I would recommend sleeving those. There's plenty of room in the insert for these sleeve cards, but you don't need to buy the whole shebang because, like I said, you don't need these. You can just buy small. There's a certain size of these.
Yeah, it's like a European. No, it's
not European, but no, it's something like that. But yeah, you can just buy those sleeves and you would be fine with those because it's really the only thing you need to sleeve because it's the only thing you're going to hold.
Size cards.
Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure what they're called, but there is a size specially made for
Yeah,
those.
there is.
Now, the other things I would complain about, these moons, they go out on certain colors of planets. There is no icon indicating which one they go to. So you have to kind of do it by color, and that can be tough. Some of the red and the brown one look very similar. The nebula ones are slightly more purple-ish than those. Put an icon on it, okay? Because that's just that would just simplify things so much.
Track.
Now, like this thing here that holds all your buildings and all the cards,
amazing.
Fantastic. There's a thing that goes on top. Keeps it in its place. That's great. I love it when they have the plastic, bits to hold all the cards in place. This rule book, however, not great. So when you first open it up, well, that's the appendix. That's why it's not very good on the rules. So when you open it up, like this opening page here, where it's got all the components listed, like I get it. You didn't want to be boring and put everything like in a line or whatever. But this was so hard to read and so hard to find the certain things I was looking for. It's just chaos, and it's like hard to tell which parts were what. Learning it straight out of the book. I didn't do any rules videos or anything because I wanted to see what it would be like to just learn it from the book.
That's valid.
And things are kind of not in a great order. Like it took me to page 20 to realize that, to put more of the planets out there, we have to get the event thing all the way around. Like at the beginning, they have sort of you can do this, or this in your turn. Okay. Well, then it doesn't talk about the last part of the event thing until literally page 20. And a lot of like back and forth because it's not in a very convenient order, in my opinion. At least it wasn't for me. I actually thought about it. They have those little stickums that your brother-in-law uses, to put those. And they're like, okay, combat is on this page.
That's that's not a bad idea.
I meant to get to that before today. And I dropped the ball and I didn't get to it. Now, like the components, like I said, they look really nice, right? Like these little moon tokens, like the icons on them are easy to read, but the telling them apart from which goes to what planet was rough.
That's brutal.
The Raiders.
Oh my god.
Amazing.
There's
There's a whole box of them over here. Like, they're friggin' amazing. Like, they are one of the coolest bits about this, along with the buildings, in my opinion. And then also, you can't see it because it's on the inside of that box. Not only there's a cool art mural on the inside, but there's a slot for the sheet that tells you how to pack everything away. So that is a good addition. Anytime you've got a complex game tray style system, put a map so people know how to get things back in there the way they came out, and that's fantastic. So I did really appreciate that part of it. Gameplay wise, I like that there's the kind of sneaky end of game types of victory points that you can win. I always appreciate games that can do that. So I started building a couple of buildings, then at the end I pushed up those tracks to make those buildings worth more points at the end of the game, so I can get more end game points out of there. So that's always fun to do. I felt like when I played Dwellings, I felt super limited on what I could do, where I could go, and some of the stuff I could do. I felt a lot more open and free to do the moves and the actions I wanted to do in this one as compared to the other one.
All right, Mike.
Yep. So first I want to talk about the art. Sergio Chavez crushed it. He did some of the art on Dwellings of Eldervale. The box cover is incredible. All the stylized art on the tiles, on the nebulas, on your faction boards, on the player aids, on the scrapyard. All of his art just absolutely amazing. Really has come onto my radar as an up and coming artist that you need to watch. So wanted to start there. He nailed it there. I thought the iconography was really strong, and the player aids are excellent. Just the sequence of a turn is laid out very well. The sequence of battle, this is all you need to resolve a battle. There were some edge cases where we had to look up certain raider abilities, but that it is what it is.
Yeah.
The icons on these were all very clear. I like how these trays tell you how much you have to pay to buy the cards. Love all that. I want to talk real quickly, because I have the most experience with Dwellings, about some of the differences between this and Dwellings.
Yeah.
So the components. Now, of course, this is a more of a space exploration game instead of fantasy. So in Dwellings, you just had a worker, and when you turn him into a dwelling, you put a hut on top of him. So he also becomes part of the building. But these things where the transports underneath and you slot the leaders into them, these are just bonkers. They all look really good. I like how they store each one of the leaders that you put inside of them. Love all that. So the tracks are far more useful now. They used to only be used for in-game scoring and how much you would score for your dwellings that you've built at the end of the game, which they still do, but now they all have abilities as you go up the track. If you have tracks and there's no abilities or special actions you can do on them, but tracks with special abilities on them, this does for Dwelling what Gaia Project did for Terra Mystica. It took tracks that essentially had very little meaning and added tons of useful abilities up the tracks. Excellent change here. The modules that you get to add to your recall engine. It used to be you had to have a worker available to activate every single card that you wanted, and sometimes you wouldn't have them available. It was very difficult to activate every single card that was in your recall engine. Well, now all of your green ones just take the one and you activate the whole row. Now you can use energy, and if you have a ship here, you can activate additional modules that are in the same row. That's a really smart change because the recall engine is excellent in Dwelling. It was hard to activate all your cards. Now it's easy to activate all your cards. So the recall engine here is way more fulfilling and feels great when you've got a ton of cards like Bob did over there slotted on there. Tim had 5 cards on his primary reactor. It feels great when you get those going because you're going to trigger almost all of those cards every time you recall. So that was a really smart change. The other one that is, I can see pros and cons here. So it used to be there was a specific tile on the board that was you could buy cards and it would expand the board. So it did both. But then they split it and there was a module called the Oracle where you could simply buy cards but not pull more planets out because the additional tiles that come out were one of the in-game triggers. And sometimes you get people that would rush the in-game just by forcing the tiles to come out. And when these When that empties, the game's over. And more often than not, the game went in from that action than anything else I saw in the game. You could end the game by building all 6 of your dwelling. That was the other way you could trigger the end of the game. But more often than not, I would see it by people using the Explorer action. Now it's tied to this little track, and every time you go to these places that have this escalation icon on it, this goes around the track. There's more spots depending on the number of players, but it can take, in a 3-player game, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trips around here before this gets resolved, and this comes out, and it's got ways to score, but now a planet comes out. So you don't have as much control of planets coming out, which makes it feel less thematic for me. Like, I'm going around a track and only every 5 times does a new planet come out. That doesn't feel as thematic as far as like exploration goes, but it paces the game better because you score every time one of these cards come out, and you're scoring based on the tracks. So it's a little bit of pros and cons for me. It's not as thematic. You have less control of planets coming out, but you score more during the game, and that paces the end game better. So mix and match feelings for me. Overall, though, this is all other than that, everything in this game is an improvement over Dwellings. I would much rather play this over Dwellings. I think this game is fantastic. It's one of the best games I've played this year. The fact that we were able to play a 3-player learning game in under 2.5 hours with all of this going on bodes very well for it. I think it's one you can play more frequently than some of these other games that are like main event games. Now, this is a main event game, but it's going to be one you can play more than 1 or twice a year is what I'm saying by that play time. So I have lots of positive things to say about this.
So I guess my potential negative that I will say, I'll jump out with that first, because I think that'll be a shorter part of my my thoughts and feelings on this. I don't know that I would play this at more than 3 players.
Okay.
Because of the game length and the downtime between turns. Now, there was time with 3 players that I don't think would hardly ever happen with 4 players, where it's like, boom, I'm done, you can go. And like, you were like, go. I mean, it was, we had relatively quick turns. I think the longest the turns took were the recall, because there's so much stuff
trying to do things in order
going on with the engine, which is a good problem to have because of the way you can pick and choose the way your engine resolves. But I could see it getting bogged down with 4 or more if you're someone like me that doesn't want to get bogged down in that. Because when Mike is going, I can kind of plan what I want to do, but there was definitely times where you're getting ready to take an action, and I'm like, okay, if Bob doesn't go there, I can do this. But now if you go there, the cool thing is if you still went to the place I want to go,
you can still do the action.
If it's a base, I can still do the action. Cool. I just got to then have a fight afterwards, right? I don't really have a problem with that. So I felt like good about that. But my concern would be, for me, my personal preference, because I could see playing this at like 1 higher up, at least on the thing, and playing, because by the end of the game, I'm like, man, like
a couple more turns.
I could like play this more. The beginning of the game, I'm like, this thing is dragging.
Yeah, that's the common engine builder thing.
So that's my neg on this, right? Also, is that at the beginning of the game, it feels
a little sluggish.
It's frustrating because it's sluggish, and I was fortunate. And I think everybody else felt pretty good about their engines as it's gone. But I've also played these engine builders where people have had a bad time because they didn't build their engine very well early. And then they're screwed the rest of the game. I don't know that this feels that punishing, but I've complained about it in other games that take longer. If you feel like you're behind the 8 ball 3 or 4 turns in, in the first hour.
No catching up.
And you got 2 more hours.
It's tough.
There's not a lot of catching up to do. Now, I don't feel like that's necessarily the case here, but either I got lucky on how I built my engine, or the game lends itself to like, no, man, like, be smart about how you build. Because I built these yellow ones first. I was like, yeah, I'm building these yellow ones. These look really good. And then I got frustrated because they weren't going to work necessarily the way that I'd hoped they would. But then I was able to pivot a little. I built up that green row, and then all of a sudden,
here comes the resources.
Everything flipped. It took an hour, and then everything flipped. And then the game legitimately became fun for me. I wouldn't say it wasn't fun, but I'm like, game of the year, get out of here. Like,
Tight.
It
starts tight.
Get the F out of here. That first hour. I'm like, don't come at me with that BS. I don't know that it's my game of the year, but I do think that at 3 players, if you know if you have an idea of what you're getting into, but these guys did a nice job of teaching and like making sure that I understood the rules. And I asked a lot of questions like, why would I even do that? Right? Like, why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense. You guys did a really nice job being patient with me and explaining how that all worked. And then it all starts to click. And then the engine gets going. And now you've got the resources to do the fun stuff. Got way better. Because like any engine builder, like that's the appeal of it, right? You build that engine and you start firing that sucker off. And it's like, I don't even know what my points are.
I know, I wanted to fire this thing off a couple more times.
Yeah, I don't know what my points are, but I'm having fun because I'm doing stuff. And I actually like finished relatively close, like to bot.
I didn't really feel like anybody was out of the game, and
not at all.
Yeah, the big spread came when we did the end game.
Not at all. And so I appreciated that. I agree with you guys with the tracks. The tracks were all really interesting, and it was really like more of a struggle. Like, oh well, which one do I want to try to push up now because I want to get this and then I want to get that. But I felt like I got to do a little bit of everything, because that's the other thing is sometimes with these games, I was really worried early on. I'm like, I'm not even able to build any buildings because I can't get enough flipping resources to do it. And I was cranky about that. But then I was able to build a couple buildings and it felt good and they look awesome on the table. I will say the best ones are like these observatories because the leader that fits into it actually contributes to what the model is doing because it looks like the telescope coming out, right?
Well, the factory
because
has
otherwise
the
it just looks like
too.
a shield generator from Hoth.
Sure.
Or no, it looks, but anyways.
From Hoth, yeah.
But it looks like a thing from Hoth. But I mean, that looks awesome. That looks great. The spaceports, stay outside, whatever.
That was kind of cool. They're in the building, skyscrapers.
These are more look like smokesacks, which I can
dig.
Yeah, I can dig that. But this is arbitrary, and the
Halo swords.
The Halo sword is arbitrary.
They look cool though.
They look cool as hell. I'm like, look, if that's the worst thing I got to say about the buildings is that like some of them, they look thematic when you put your leaders in and others just look like your chunks of plastic are sticking out of them. Whatever. These minis are great.
Yeah,
all of their abilities were
Insane.
really cool. And I don't feel like they were so punishing because the combat I feel like is a really fun and good design, and there's tactics cards which allow you to mitigate that stuff.
So we didn't get to fight the octopus because when you do these once up here, you get to look at the two cards, and I put one on the bottom. I put the octopus one at the bottom. He pulls you in and makes you fight.
Nice.
If you're adjacent to him,
That's
so you gotta watch out for him because
cool.
He'll make you fight him.
But I mean, I would definitely play this again. This is definitely appointment gaming. From me.
All right. I feel like you can play this game and then wrap it up and play another couple of small games before the end of the night.
Yeah,
it's not like one of
yeah.
those appointment games that takes the whole night, but you do have to be ready for it.
Again, though, 3 players. I would not sit down for a 5-player learning game if I already knew how.
Sure.
Like, no.
With that caveat, learning game, probably not. But
No,
if
hell no.
4 people in a 5th maybe learning game, okay, maybe. But I would definitely like to try this at 4 or 5 players.
Sure.
We've played it at 2. We've played it at 3. I would increase it.
I would rather just keep playing it at 3 and increasing the points, like from 60 to 7. You know what I mean?
Sure, that too. But the thing is when you play with more people, you have more starting tiles out. So there's more spaces and more stuff and options going on. So
Sure.
there is that.
Okay. I still don't want to buy in for the downtime. I would not trade the downtime for the options.
I would not play with somebody with super AP.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Too many options.
There's too many
Even though
options.
there's only 2 options, there's too many.
Too many options.
The one gives you a lot of choices.
It does.
But I started off, again, the first hour playing this, not fun. And then it got
It took
fun.
a minute to get going.
Now going in and having already played it, I think I will appreciate it and be a lot less surly for the first hour, maybe just the first half hour while I try to get the stuff I need. But the ships are cool, asymmetric abilities. I thought it was fun. I thought it was really, really solid, really good. And I can definitely see why you'd say it's better than Dwellings. I feel like it's
Definitely better than Dwellings.
it does a few things that are more thematic, right? These buildings do cooler things than just putting a hut on top of your dude.
Yeah.
And these tracks are badass.
So we should probably rate this.
We should.
How do we rate these things, Tim?
Oh my gosh, this is Board Game Rundown. So we're going to average all of our scores onto BGG. And if you use the BGG system, it's basically like a 0 to 10 with 0.5s, or at least we do 0.5s.
We do.
And then we're going to average our scores together. Bob's got a calculator over there. And then that will be the official entry for the Board Game Rundown. So, Bob, everyone wants to know, what score do you give Andromeda's Edge?
Ooh, that's a great question. With everything said and done, I would like to give it an 8.5, but with some of like the nitpicky things that I had wrong with it, I'm going to give it an 8 because it is a solid game. I'm glad I have it in my collection. I would reach to play for this again, but just the small details, trays not being quite the right size, the sleeves that you're going to sell me and that you don't really need or can fit, the rule book being as kind of jumbled as it was, knocks the half point. 8.
Mike?
It's a 9 for me. It's one of my favorite games from this year. The mild complaint of I wish there were more planets that come out is pretty mild. Everything else in this game is an improvement over Dwellings, which was a game I already liked quite a bit. Didn't even mention that now ships have targeting, and that gives the opportunity to re-roll.
Yeah,
and the combat resolution in this game may be one of my favorite ways to resolve combat in any game I've ever played. You can be going up against a raider that rolls 6 dice, but single highest result wins. So
I won a battle with that.
1 6 will beat 4 5s every time. So when that happens, just yes, you get some celebratory moments in this game. It's fun to play. It's fulfilling when your recall engine is going, which mine did not so much last game.
Yeah, it didn't look very good.
But I still really enjoyed it. I still got 3 buildings built out or developments built. I really enjoy this game. I think if you like heavier games with some worker placement and the fact that this has constant player interaction with which a lot of worker placements really lack, I'm very impressed with this game.
Yeah, I appreciated that losing combat isn't as punishing as it potentially could be.
Right.
You know, so I mean, there's some good things.
You still get to use the tile.
I think it's going to be a 7.5 for me. I think it's hurt a little bit by just not wanting to play it at higher player counts personally. I know you guys are talking about like higher player counts, not with new people, maybe with people that have already played.
Sure.
I do think like half of this tray is really good. The other half kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like you're supposed to be able to use the lid to store your bits, but then there's no place for your leaders. You have to just put them somewhere else, like on your faction board, I guess.
Yeah, I just didn't understand that. I mean, some of it is a little
well,
excessive.
I mean, like, right, your 4 moons, 4 moons, and this actually fits, 10
it tells
perfectly.
you max 10.
And you're 5 and 5 and 5, and then you just have to put your leaders on your faction board as opposed to your thing, because that does sit over this whole thing like that.
Yeah, it does.
Like that.
It does, but it's kind of clunky.
It's a little clunky.
With where it was.
It's okay.
Yeah, but anyway.
So our scores average together, beep, boop, boop, 8.2. Pretty good.
It was good. It
Solid.
was fun. I would definitely play this again.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we did joke about it, but the long setup time.
Yeah, it is a beast to set up.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yep. I really enjoy this. I can't wait to play this again. I can't wait to see more of these factions and their special abilities.
Yeah.
There are so many different ones. The replayability and the random setup is bonkers.
I enjoyed my faction, and I was thinking about like trying to remember some of the abilities that I passed on, and it's like, man, those would have been really cool. But I don't know that I would have thought, like, I feel like I had a really good one to start with too, so it was like, okay.
Yeah, the last one I did they have like a ghost ability, so when I recall, I can activate any base that doesn't have anybody on it.
Nice.
So that was kind of neat.
I'll tell you one I got last time, which feels like such a game changer. At the end of your turn, you can move any leader to an adjacent territory. So imagine being able to line up those leaders to score your
maximum
developments.
points. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. That's neat. Right on. Well, this was fun, guys. Bob, thanks for setting it up and playing it with me.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, for the Board Game Rundown, I've been Tim.
Bob.
Mike.
We'll see you in space.